We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. It is 2023. Well, it's not 2023 when I'm recording this. I know when you listen to this, it will be 2023. And I am excited, very excited for the start of a new year. I'm one of those people that, really looks forward to setting new goals, getting a fresh start, and not just that, New Year's resolution bullshit. You know what I mean? I don't really believe in setting a New Year's resolution. I believe in, really planning out and setting goals that you're going to stretch yourself. They're difficult goals, but you're going to try to hit them. You're going to put systems and, some steps in place to achieve your goals. And at Lions of Liberty here with, of course, Brian McWilliams, my colleague here at Lions, we are putting some goals in place. We are growing our audience. We are going to massively grow our audience this year. And we're starting to do that in the second part of January. We'll be advertising this podcast across multiple platforms in order to grow this thing and blow this thing up. And of course, we love the listeners and the reach we have right now, but the more reach we get, the bigger, download numbers we have. It means the more we'll be able to do with this show. Of course, you can support that directly. You can support us directly by joining our Lions of Liberty Pride. And not only do you get to give us some money financially to help with that goal, but we're also going to give you bonus content along with that. You'll get some bonus content every single week. Brian has a daily show, quick 5-minute show that he does almost every weekday morning. And we have a show called Degenerate Gamblers where we talk about sports and other stuff trending in culture and the news, as well as telling some good funny stories about our daily lives. And we have a conspiracy show, Secrets. We just changed the name. It's called Secrets, Lies, and Cover-Ups. And, we're due for another one of those. That should be about every month, every 6 weeks. We'll get that more regular in 2023. And who knows what else we're going to do. Of course, we have my show on Mondays, Brian's Mean Age Daydream on Wednesdays, and then a show almost every single Friday, unless there's a holiday or some other special occasion. You'll get a show every Friday. And we're going to keep on going right into and through 2023. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you will choose to become a part of it. And with that being said, I want to get us kicked off into this year talking about really ways to prepare for, potential attacks on the power grid, losing power for time. We saw what just happened in Buffalo a couple weeks ago with that terrible snowstorm and cold front that came through and all of those people dying and as individuals not being prepared. And on Finding Freedom, it's not just about making money or about our spiritual health or about, our physical health. It's also about being prepared as individuals, as families and communities to be able to stand up and protect ourselves, to survive if something does happen, to band together with our neighbors and, not only survive, but thrive if something, does happen. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but we can't be reliant on the government or whomever to come in and save us if a natural disaster or some sort of other thing strikes. So without any further delay, I've been talking for a while. I'm excited for this episode, excited for 2023. Let's get into today's show. All right, we're live to the Lions of Liberty Pride, and I am joined here today by Brian Searcy. Brian is a retired United States Air Force colonel. He's the founder and CEO of the Paratus Group, where he uses his decades-tested and decorated senior leadership and military experience to solve the need for relevant and effective principles in situational awareness and leadership. He's also a best-selling author with his book, Prepare for the Real World. The World is Not a Safe Place, where he provides training methodologies and programs for the learning of situational awareness. I wanted to bring Brian on because everything happening in the world with these different attacks on the power grid, with just preparedness in general, with the uncertainty we have in our world with supply chains. Brian, welcome to Finding Freedom.
John, Merry Christmas, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, and yeah, thanks for coming on in the this weird time that we're in now between Christmas and New Year's, where people don't really know what day it is or what's happening. But I appreciate you setting some time aside to sit down and talk about this important stuff. Before we get into talking about really your expertise, probably good to start with you personally to give my audience a little bit of background on you and what you're all about.
Yeah, so 23 years in the Air Force. I came in the Air Force in 1987. In 1988, graduated from undergraduate navigator training at Mather Air Force Base and went and flew AWACS. From there, went to JSTARS. Over about the next 15 years, I was a squadron commander, had 2 tours at the Pentagon, was a group commander, and then I retired as the active duty wing commander at Robins Air Force Base. When I retired, I did what a lot of retired senior officers do, and I went to work for a defense contractor, but after about 18 months realized that wasn't really for me. So I helped my wife build her apparel screen printing company, which is doing amazing, by the way. And then I started doing public speaking, keynote speaking on leadership and those types of things. And when the Parkland shooting happened, not long after that, I got together with about 14 other retired military and law enforcement just because we were just, how do we stop this from happening? And we basically realized that for years we've been talking about symptoms and not dealing with the problems. Since then, in the end of 2019, I broke off from a few of those guys who really just wanted to do the active shooter training. And that's about what you do if you have to respond to an active shooter training. I wanted to focus on how do we prevent active shooter events from happening? How can we prevent them from happening? And then right after I founded the Paratus Group, I had a God moment where I realized that it's not just preventing active shooting, it's preventing all the threats that are out there today. And what the key to that is to have use the God-given gift of situational awareness, the 10 critical personal skills that you need to have situational awareness, and then also to be successful in life, and have then the desire to take responsibility for your own safety and then the safety of your community. And that's what I've now been focused on since 2020. I speak around the country on that, introducing what is situational awareness, what are all of the threats that we face, how do we prevent them from happening, and what are the 10 critical skills. And then at the Paratus Group, we have a program that's a year long because we're all about the development of habits and behaviors by practicing a process instead of the traditional training, which hasn't solved anything for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to unpack, a lot to talk about there. I want to dig in first and just talk about situational awareness and what that means. What does it mean to? I know you talk about when you're walking down the street, putting your phone away and looking around and really understanding the situation you're in, understanding your surroundings, and then being able to contrast that. Being able to be aware of when something is off, when something doesn't seem right. So can you talk a little bit about how that works and how you advise people to really take account for their surroundings?
Yeah, so situational awareness has a number of components, but and why we've developed our programs the way that we have, it's actually a process. It's something that you have to learn and develop the habits and the behaviors. If you just look at situational awareness and people think it's just being self-aware and being perceptive and knowing what's going on around you. There are a lot of people that actually do that. They get that hair on the back of the neck, or they get that gut feeling about that something isn't right. But then because of the normalcy bias, or because they haven't thought about what to do in that situation and they don't know what they're capable of doing, oftentimes they don't do anything. And our focus is to learn and develop that skill of situational awareness the habits and the mindsets, but you use the process that we have in our program so that you are on a regular basis thinking about how can I prevent these things from happening? If I see something happening, then what do I do about it? So you can actually take an action and prevent it from happening.
So what are some of those steps? Can you give us an example of how that would play out in a real life scenario?
Yeah. So there's a process in the Air Force called the OODA Loop. It's observe, orient, decide, and act. And when I was a squadron commander, my squadron was responsible for the operation of the air war at the KAOK in Qatar. So we were responsible for all of the air assets that were in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we consistently practiced and used the OODA Loop. We would observe what's going on. We would then orient ourselves and the forces that we had available based on what the bad people were doing, or if our airplanes were breaking or we couldn't refuel them, all these things that are going on. And then we would have to make decisions, and then we would have to act. So at the Paratus Group, we've taken the OODA Loop that's been around since the Vietnam War, and the Air Force practices it on a regular basis, into a 5-step process. It's identify, assess, predict, decide, and act. See, one of the things I got frustrated about when we were trying to teach people how to do active shooter response is that when people don't see something coming and they don't know what they're capable of doing, they're not able to do anything. We can tell them this is what you should do, but if they don't have that ability, we basically set them up for failure. When you teach somebody how to use a tool to prevent something from happening, that's how we empower them to be successful. So identify, you stop, look, and listen anywhere you go. So for example, I use fueling at the gas station. We're seeing attacks in gas stations on a rise across the United States. I think you've probably seen that on the news as well, just like we've seen in the subways and those types of things. So when I pull into a gas station, and this is what my wife does, and this is what everybody learns that takes our program, when you pull in, you're not on your phone, you're not goofing off, you're looking around and you're looking to orient yourself so that you'll have a good view of what's going on. And then you identify, is there anything here today that I'm concerned about? No? Okay. Then you go to the next step after identify, which is assess. Identify, assess. So like I said, I'm going to park my car where it's not in a dark area. I'm going to park my car where, especially if I'm a woman or something, where there's other people around me. When I get out of my car, I leave my car door open and I pay attention. Before I even start the process of putting my credit card in, I'm paying attention to what's going on around me, making sure that's nothing setting off the hair on the back of my neck or my gut feeling. So you identify, assess, and then you predict. So if anything happened today, if somebody came up and were starting to come up and wanted to attack me or rob me or whatever, I think about what would I do? Are there other people around? I leave my truck door open because if I need to, I'm going to get in my truck, lock the truck door. And if I have to, even if I'm filling up my car, I'm going to start the car and drive away if the threat is something that I can't handle on my own. So you're thinking about what you would do in that situation. And then for me, I'm not just thinking about what I would do for my own safety, or if my family's with me for my family's safety. I'm paying attention to other people that are in the gas station that are putting fuel in their vehicle, making sure that I can, if I feel or see anything happening, if I get that hair on the back of my neck or a gut feeling that something might happen to them, I then think about what I would do to keep them safe, to prevent something bad happening to them. So those are the 3 steps that we practice all the time. Then the next step is respond. So if something does set off the hair on the back of my neck or my gut feeling, and I've already thought through what I would do, now I start to take action. And then if I absolutely have to act to defend myself or run away or get in my truck and drive off, that's the final step. So it's identify, assess, predict, decide, and act.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, I'll be honest, some of those things I do and some of them I don't. I think it's interesting that the leaving your car door open. At first, when you said that, I was thinking, why would you leave your car door open? Somebody could jump in your car. But if you have the keys, if they jump in your car, what are they going to do? They'll just be jumping in your car, and you're still really in control of the situation, I guess. But yeah, if you got to make a quick getaway, yeah.
Well, the key here is that you are practicing situational awareness, and you're not standing there on your phone. You're not, not paying attention. You're consistently looking around. And if there is somebody walking up that is looking to do you harm, we have that God-given gift where you're going to get that hair on the back of the neck or that gut feeling. So I have already thought through situations. If it's something that I don't think I can handle, and this is especially what all my daughters and my wife are trained to do. If a man is coming up, or a group of men are coming up, I would much rather you stop what you're doing, get in your truck and get in the car and drive off, than to think you could deal with it. One of the things that we consistently hammer home in our program is when you get that feeling that something isn't right, you've got to do something about it. So many people become victims because even though they got that hair on the back of the neck or gut feeling that it wasn't right, they didn't do anything about it. I've been asked numerous times, don't you think that's being paranoid? I've made plenty of decisions in the Air Force where I had that gut feeling or the hair on the back of my neck where nothing ended up happening, and maybe at times had a little bit of egg on my face. But I also don't know how many times I trusted that gut feeling and I kept somebody, an aircraft or something bad from happening. And that's what we talk about. We don't want people to have regrets. We don't want people to have I wish I would have done this, because I've talked to a lot of parents whose kids have been human trafficked or have committed or attempted suicide. And some of the biggest things that they have is anger and regret that they didn't trust what they saw and they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, there's something innate in humans where even when we do start to get that gut feeling, we start to convince ourselves that those feelings, should be ignored or to suppress them. But yeah, I think that's great advice. I did want to touch. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's the normalcy bias, and 75 to 80% of the time, that's what people do. They rationalize that it's not what I think it is.
Mm-hmm. I did want to come back to school shootings for a minute. You said you were involved after the Parkland shooting. I think you said with a group that got more focused on the response, and you were more targeting sort of the root causes. And maybe I'm not understanding that correctly. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think school shootings, so much of at least what the response is from what I see from what my local school district does, it's almost fully centered around just responding to it rather than preventing or giving people the tools they need in order to combat it. So can you talk a little bit more about your ideas around preventing school shootings?
Yeah. So when they're empowered with situational awareness and a process, so that means that they keep their doors, the school doors locked. People are walking around. They make sure that they have the badge. They make sure that they've gone through the process to be in the school. They pay attention to the behavior of their students. They pay attention to the behavior of parents. They pay attention to the behavior of their fellow teachers and administrators. That's where you get those clues of whether something bad might happen, since most school shootings have been a disgruntled parent, employee, or student. And then the other thing, that when you have situational awareness and you look to identify problems and not symptoms, would be a bullying example. We know that a number of high school students particularly have had a major rise in suicide ideation because of bullying, and they have also led to potentially being active shooters because of that bullying. And what happens is teachers and parents will potentially see that bullying behavior, and then what they do is they potentially punish the person doing the bullying, but the person being bullied is usually the one that ends up being the active shooter, because nobody does anything to take care of the emotional stress that they have been under. And you can't identify all these things and provide the help that these people need without situational awareness. And then finally, the prevention piece ties directly into how do you respond. For about 2.5 years, I went into schools and I did assessments and I wrote emergency plans. I helped them go through scenarios on what they should do if there's an active shooter. And the problem with that is that the plans sit on a shelf. The training, no matter how good it is, within a week or 2 weeks, because we're telling them what they should do instead of them figuring out what they should do for themselves, they forget most of that. So they're not actually prepared to deal with those types of situations. So when you prepare somebody to prevent something from happening with a process like we have, you automatically train them for them to be able to know what they need to do to be able to respond to a situation, whether it's an active shooter or somebody talking about committing suicide. The list goes on.
Mm-hmm. I think that's 100% spot on there. I do want to pivot here and start to talk about these attacks we've seen on the power grid, which I think they're not being talked about enough in the media. You're barely hearing about it. There were, I think, 2 separate attacks in North Carolina. Maybe that was a month or 6 weeks ago. I'm not sure on timing. And then in Oregon, within the last week or 2 weeks, there was at least 2 on different stations. So can you talk about that a little bit? How sophisticated have these attacks been? And I mean, how worried should we be?
Well, let's talk about the worried first. Most people take for granted the fact that pretty much everything that they rely on in their lives today requires electricity, whether it's heat, whether it's air conditioning, whether it is banking, whether it's putting gas in your vehicle, whether it's going to the grocery store. The sanitation that all of our municipalities provide requires electricity. So if electricity goes out for an extended period of time, you don't have sanitation. So pretty much everything that we need requires electricity, and we've become dependent on it. And people today don't know how to take responsibility for themselves when they lose these things. They expect there to be water. They expect to be able to take a shower. They expect to be able to turn on their oven. They expect all of these things because it's amazing, that we have all these things. So what we talk about when it comes to preparation, and I don't know how to solve the problem to make our substations more safe, because they are very, very vulnerable. Most of the time they're out in the middle of a city or of a community. There might be a fence around them. But bullets and bombs and explosives can do a lot to those things. They've got cameras, but cameras, so I'm sorry to say, are a forensic tool. They do very little to prevent anything from ever happening. So right now, our substations are very, very vulnerable, and our grid is not the strongest that it could potentially be across our country. And that is not really, like I said, the area that I'm focusing on when I'm talking about these types of things, other than when I'm out and about. I have situational awareness. If I'm driving by a substation and I see some activity that sets off that hair of the back of my neck or a gut feeling, I know what I would do in that case to potentially get emergency responders there to potentially stop something bad from happening. And again, I would much rather overreact than to drive by, say that doesn't look right, and the next day find out that there was an attack on a substation, and now I know I don't have any power in my home. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, though, is our personal preparation. Vince Flynn wrote a great book where there was somebody got paid a lot of money who worked for an electric company who basically took the grids down across the United States. So there was no power in the United States. And within a week, basically society had deteriorated. People were killing each other for food. There were riots. It was crazy. So what we talk about at the Paratus Group in just overall preparation is, if you were to lose electricity for 2 or 3 weeks, are you prepared for that? What would you do? And then it's different for everybody, depending on where you live, depending on what your skills are. So here at our house, we have food that's available. We have a way to cook that food. We have money in the safe. We have extra water. We have extra fuel. So for that 2 or 3 weeks, and then if it goes past that, and we have a bunch of people that aren't prepared, unfortunately, I'd be afraid that we would have a scenario like what was in Vince Flynn's book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fearful that I'm not prepared after seeing this. It's been a wake-up call for me, but even more so, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit prepared. I think the vast majority of the public isn't prepared at all. And we kind of see this play out if we just look recently what's happened in the past week here in Buffalo, New York, with this snowstorm and this horrible cold temperatures that came through with the wind. And I think a lot of people have been conditioned to think that oh, if the power goes out, or, if I'm stranded, someone's going to come save me. Someone's going to come help me. They're not just going to, leave me here. And the truth of the matter is, in these situations, no one's coming to help you, right? So what types of things, some, easy things should people be doing? You talked about having food to eat, way to cook food, have fuel. What are some other things that really everybody should be doing to be prepared for a situation if they're going to lose power?
Well, and that's why we say at the Paratus Group in our programs that every family, every individual has to figure that out, because we all have different skills, and then the desire to learn those skills. And then the other thing that I would say is, and this is something that over the last 30 years, our culture has totally changed. It used to be that if something like this were to happen, you and all of your neighbors would band together, and I would have certain skills, and I'd have another neighbor that had certain skills, and another neighbor that had certain skills. So combined, we all would be able to do the things that would be necessary to be able to deal with and be able to respond to whatever that event was. Today, unfortunately, because people are used to flipping a switch and having the light, they're used to dialing their phone and having Uber Eats deliver their food. They are not prepared to be their own first responder, to take responsibility for their own safety and the safety of their families. To your point, we dial 911 and we expect an emergency responder to come no matter what the problem is, instead of having thought through, okay, if something happens, how can I potentially prevent it from happening, or how can I potentially deal with it? And we believe at the Paratus Group, a big part of that is because people haven't developed the 10 critical personal skills that they need. So we're so used to being able to just look it up online. We don't have to think critically anymore. We don't have to listen effectively. We don't have to make decisions. We don't have to have empathy or humility. We don't have to know how to communicate. We don't have to be perceptive and understand that there's different perspectives. And because we don't practice those skills and we don't practice situational awareness, we just expect somebody else to do it, and we're not able to take responsibility for ourselves. So when I talk to individuals, if they have some play, if here where I am, I actually am very close to two of my daughters, actually three of my daughters, my mother and father-in-law, my brother and sister-in-law. So we could easily get to each other's homes and help each other out. And each of us do have different skills, but I've even thought through how that process would be and what skills that I could rely on them if necessary. And the fact that my mother and father-in-law are probably going to need some help. So I'm going to need to not only take care of my family, but help take care of them. That's why the point is there's so many different inputs that go into this. Your capabilities have to be part of what that is. And one of the things that we do in our program is we teach people through the development of being self-aware, what are you capable of doing? And if there's something else that you want to be able to do, then go get trained on that. Go learn how to do that. Add that to your toolkit. And then make sure you have the necessary resources to be able to do what it is that you said that you're going to do. And that's when it all ties together. One of the biggest frustrations I get is when somebody hands 50 people in a room in a situation, this is what you're supposed to do, but only 5 of those people are actually prepared to do it. The other 45 people have no idea what you're talking about, and you just set them up for failure. That's why, like I said, in our program, everybody figures out for themselves through the development of this process, what they would do and how they can protect themselves and their family.
Well, I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I obviously I had you on the show because I wanted you to talk to my audience, but I'd kind of like you to speak to and convince people why they need to be, going through these steps, why they need to be prepared and aware of these, these situations are a real possibility. I mean, we look at, how fragile the supply chain has become. There's tensions with China, there's tensions with Russia, all kinds of global issues right now, really unprecedented stuff that I thought I'd never see in my lifetime has played out in the past several years. So am I way off base, or are we really, are we at a point that we could really lose our power grid for 3-4 weeks? Is that something that's out of the question, or what do you think about that?
Well, I certainly hope it isn't. But we've had a massive influx of people that have come across our southern border, and we have no idea who a lot of those people are. One of the things that I'm grateful for is the fact that terrorists have not realized how susceptible our electric grid is. They haven't realized how susceptible a number of other areas are. For example, active shooting events. They do an active shooting event in one location. They draw in, and I'm sure you've seen every single one, every single emergency responder within a 50-mile radius comes in, and then they set off a second device. They were smart enough to do that in Afghanistan and Iraq, but they haven't done that here yet. We're seeing people being attacked in subway stations for no reason. And that's a big part of our program, because if I'm paying attention and I'm seeing somebody that's not paying attention, and I can then do something about that person that is going up to that individual. So we all as a community start to take responsibility back for our safety. Now that's how we're going to make a difference. I talk more and more in our programs about how if hundreds of people learn and develop this skill, and it goes back to what I said, how it was 30, 40 years ago, when we as communities start taking back responsibility for our safety, when we no longer look like the easy victim, and that's a big part of the answer to your question. When we're walking down the street and we're on our phone, we're not paying attention, we are the easy target for the predator, no matter what it is, whether it's just somebody that wants to knock you out, wants to rob you, wants to assault you, wants to kidnap you, whatever the case may be. But when you act and look prepared, and you don't put yourself into situations where you could be a victim, that's how you keep yourself safe. And then, like I said, when you learn to take care of your own safety and then have the empathy to care about those around you, that's how we make a difference. We've seen events happen, like I said, on subway stations, in subway cars, in restaurants, in grocery stores, at gas stations. And then what people do is they take out their phone and they film it. That's not what I do, and that's not what we encourage people to do in our program. We encourage them to figure out, if you start to see something getting ready to happen, what would you do to stop it? Would you scream? Would you get somebody else's attention? Would you get their attention and tell them to run? But it's all that part of the process, and you have to think through what you're going to do and then be prepared to do it. And you can't do that without situational awareness.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up with the people pulling out their phone and recording. I mean, you'll see these people post like fights, brutal fights in like high schools between kids, and just all the other kids are just standing around with their phones recording it. Nobody's jumping in to break it up or to do anything. Just hard to even wrap my mind around how that even happens. But
a big part of it today goes back to those 10 critical personal skills that I talked about. Mm-hmm. Without those 10 critical personal skills, you don't know how to have conversations with other people. You don't know how to make sure you don't escalate situations, and you don't know how to de-escalate situations. So that means that you now solve disputes with anger and violence. And that's what we've seen. There's been about a 350% rise in people resolving differences through anger and violence instead of through conversation.
So let's dig into that for a minute here. What has changed over time, do you think, in the past 2 or 3 decades, where it seems like, more people now are, more quick to anger and violence than maybe they were a decade ago?
Well, it goes back to the 10 critical personal skills that I talked about. Mm-hmm. These started decaying about 30 or 40 years ago. Parents stopped teaching it to their kids, and they expected their kids to learn these 10 critical personal skills in school. They're not taught in school. Then they expected them to be learned in college. They're not learned in college. And now we're actually to a point where businesses are actually having to bring programs in to teach critical skill, personal skill, soft skill development to their employees so that they can be successful. That's a big part of the problem. And like I said, when you don't have these skills, when you don't understand that it's okay for you and I to have a different perspective and have a conversation about it, it's okay. It's part of being, in the greatest country on the planet. That's what our republic is founded on. But people have gotten to the point now where if your truth isn't my truth, then I don't like you, and I'm going to do everything I can to beat you down and potentially, get into violence with you. Yeah. But a big part of that is because people don't have these 10 critical skills. Unfortunately, the statistic says that about 92% of college graduates leave college without having these skills well developed today. And that is just a scary statistic. And that's what I'm focused on. Instead of complaining about it, let's empower people with these skills. Let's empower parents with this skill. So, if they don't have it, they can learn it. If they have it, they can learn how to make sure their kids learn it, so that 10 or 15 years from now, we don't have the problem that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a different world today than the world that I grew up in. I'm 39 years old, but I mean, if we even just back how much things have changed, I have a 7-year-old daughter now, and the world that she's coming into, she's in first grade, and she's learning to navigate this world. It's totally different than if I look back on, when I was about the same age, and the different things you're exposed to. I mean, just looking at what age is right to get a kid an iPad or a phone, because as soon as you do that, you're opening up a whole new world of influence to them. We're different, different influences and different things are coming at them that they have to learn how to navigate and deal with. And I really think just a lot of, it's unfortunate because interpersonal skills, communication skills that people haven't been taught, now those same people are raising children, and it's like compounding over time. It's really not a good situation, but like you said, this isn't being taught in schools. It's not being taught in colleges. It's going to have to really go down to the community level, and people take accountability for their own actions.
Well, yeah, and it's not supposed to be taught in schools. Parents
I agree.
basically abdicated the responsibility, and then that's why we see now that there's parents whose kids
It's
can
actually
never
dangerous.
do anything wrong.
It's kind of it's dangerous
Exactly.
for it to be taught. Yeah.
And so parents need to take on that responsibility. So let me ask you a question. So do your kids have any devices right now?
The only device that my daughter has is the iPad that the school gave her in kindergarten.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, I talk to parents all the time that you've got to get your kids these devices so they can start learning what these tools are supposed to be about. And that's one of the key things, is to make sure that they know it's not a tool, and that you're not using it, especially as a parent, as a babysitting device, because unfortunately today the average is that our kids spend over 11 hours a day on these screens, which is just crazy, right? And that's another reason why there's no personal skill, 10 critical skill development, because there's no opportunity for them to practice those things. But then the other thing we talk to parents about is you need to check what your kids are looking at. 92% of kids under the age of 17 have seen pornography in our country today. I had in one of the programs that we taught, I had a bank president who, he was already doing this before he took our program, and I've used this story now. He and his wife would check the device. They gave their kids devices at a certain age. They decided when that was going to be. They put some controls on that. But then there was also a time at night when they took them away. And when they took them away, they would look at what they were searching on the internet and what kind of texts and what kind of phone calls they were getting. And this bank president one night looked at the text that his son was getting and found out that his son was being bullied via text by other students at school. And he caught it early enough where he was now able to have conversations with his son, get his son the help that he needs, and then also figure out what to do about that bullying. Because like I said, our teenagers that are bullied are 5 times more likely to commit suicide today. That's one of the reasons, that and the pandemic, why the suicide rates for kids under age 22 have gone through the roof over the last 2 years. So giving the kids these tools so that they can learn how to use them, it's part of our life, it's part of our culture, but make sure that they know how to use it as a tool, not as a device to keep them from being bored. And then be a parent and make sure that they know that you're going to check it. You're going to look at it. That's a deterrent, but it's also a way to teach responsibility to your kids.
Tell us a little bit about the with the Paratus Group, what the offerings you have are. If someone's interested in taking some of these courses, what would they be looking, what time commitment wise and things like that?
Yeah, I travel around the United States and conduct boot camps where we have about an hour and a half where we teach what situational awareness is. what all the threats are, because most parents have no idea all the threats that are out there today, and that they're in their backyard, to include human trafficking. They're unaware of the 10 critical skills that they and their kids need to learn and develop. And then they need to figure and be educated on how you actually have to put some time in and learn and develop this program. Then we put them through a 90-day micro e-learning program where they get about 4 minutes of content a day, because we want to develop the habits and we want to develop the behaviors, and we want to educate them and inform them of the threats that are going on out there, and how the learning and development of situational awareness enables them and empowers them to keep those things from happening to their kids. And then for the next 9 months after that 90 days, they still get one piece of content a week. Again, no more than 4 or 5 minutes a day, because we don't need to take a lot of time to reinforce the habits and the behaviors and to educate them on the threats that are going on. But we need to have a program in place, because this is a perishable skill. If it's not something that is reminded about practicing your process and those types of things, you're very susceptible to taking on a bad habit and forgetting about everything that you learned. So we're very, very focused on having a program where we're consistently reinforcing the practicing of situational awareness.
So this next question is something that I often ask my guests who have either written a book or have an expansive expertise to talk about. And that is there anything that I didn't ask you, which is something that you hoped you had a chance to talk about today? Or if I did ask you everything, just something to reinforce before I let you go.
Just I would like to say to all the listeners, if you're a business owner, if you're a leader in an administrator in a school or a church, or you are part of a parent organization, reach out to the Paratus Group so we can come and have an introductory program in your area, so you can learn about the importance. And I love the questions you asked earlier about why it's important to do this. Learn what the threats are, learn that it's possible to develop the skills necessary to be able to prevent a lot of the bad things from happening. Take back the responsibility for your own communities. And then we as a community come together and we protect our kids, protect our community, and we help our emergency responders. And when we become more prepared, it's much more likely that our republic is going to survive the way that it has and the way that we all want it to.
One last question. How can people find you? How can they find the Paratus Group and anything else, your social media or any other contact information?
Yeah, so it's paratus.group, and that's the website, www.paratus.group. We have a contact page on the website, so you can reach out to me that way, or they can send me a direct email at Brian, BRIAN, at paratus.group, and that's paratus.group.
Paratus. I keep mispronouncing that. I apologize for that. But Brian, I really want to thank you for coming on the show and spending some time with my audience today.
Hey, thank you very much. Looking forward to a great 2023.
All right. Thank you. All right. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Brian Searcy. Brings a wealth of knowledge to the table on situational awareness, preparedness, and really just understanding the changing landscape in this world. We've talked about it a little bit, how a lot of these skills, a lot of these interpersonal skills, communication skills have deteriorated over the past few decades. And, we're seeing this compounding effect where people who grew up and don't have these skills now are having children and they're definitely not getting these skills. They're trying to rely on someone else to teach their kids how to de-escalate, teach their kids how to reason, teach their kids how to think critically. So it's unfortunate, but I like what Brian is doing, as he is actually trying to provide a service to help people, to foster these skills and to share them with their families, with their loved ones, with their community. So love his mission, love what he's doing. Definitely check him out. I'll have links to everything that he talked about on the show notes page today. Before I let you go, I do want to remind you, I talked about at the top of the show, I talked about the Lions of Liberty Pride. Of course, you can join that by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, or if you don't like Patreon, you can go join us on Locals. It's lionsofliberty.locals.com. Join us there. All the same stuff, all the same content, all the same great people being myself and Brian. And yeah, check us out. Like I said, we're growing in 2023. We got big plans for what is coming for Lions of Liberty, and we're excited for you to be a part of it. Share the show, share all of our shows, subscribe to all of our feeds. We have this main feed, the Lions of Liberty Network feed. We have my Finding Freedom solo feed, and Brian has his Mean Age Daydream solo feed. Share the feeds. Give us some nice 5-star ratings and reviews. You've no idea what that does for the old algorithm. Gets it ticking, man. Gets it kicking and thriving. So please do that if you haven't. And do that for any podcast you listen to. Support your podcasters. Support your local podcasters, guys. They do this stuff for most people, make no money off of it. We've been lucky to scrape some pennies together. But yeah, 2023, let's make it happen, guys. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.